The scent of eucalyptus oil still reminded Adrian Morales of the day he signed the first check. His sister Maritza had been crying over the phone, saying the dream she'd been holding on to for years, a small spa in El Paso, was finally within reach. If only she could find someone to believe in her. She didn't say it directly, but she didn't have to. Adrian, who had just landed a promotion in Los Angeles, offered the money before she finished her sentence. He remembered how she paused, then said, "You're the only one who ever shows up. You know that," and that was enough for him. He wired the money that night. Adrian was used to showing up. When their mother was sick, he paid the hospital bills. When their younger cousin got evicted, he covered the rent. When Maritza's son needed braces, it was Adrian again. He never questioned it. He had grown up being the invisible one, quiet, smart, and gay in a conservative Latino family that never quite said they were ashamed of him, but also never said they were proud. So when he became successful, he took it as his role to lift others, thinking maybe then he'd be seen not for who he loved, but for what he gave. The spa opened 6 months later. Adrian built the website, designed the brand, ran the marketing from his apartment in West Hollywood. He didn't care that his name wasn't on the signage. What mattered was that Maritza was thriving, or so he thought. Whenever he visited, she introduced him as "my brother from LA," then quickly pivoted to talking about her hustle, her vision, her triumph over adversity. Adrian would just smile, pretending not to notice how often his part was edited out. He would have kept smiling forever if it weren't for that one moment, unplanned, quiet, and cruel. It happened at their mother's birthday. The whole family gathered in the backyard, music playing, kids running around, laughter spilling into the evening air. Someone proposed a toast to family. Maritza stood up, raised her glass, and said, "And to my spa, which I built from nothing but a dream and grit, no one handed it to me." Adrian stared at her glass, frozen midair. He wasn't expecting gratitude, but he wasn't prepared for erasure either. Later that night, he overheard her in the kitchen. She was talking to a cousin, voice half mocking. Of course he thinks he helped. He gave money, sure, but the brand, the clients, that was all me. He just invested so he could feel like he matters. Something inside him sank. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Cold, detached, like his worth had an expiration date once the money cleared. He drove back to Los Angeles that night without saying goodbye. What Maritza didn't know, what the whole family didn't care to learn, was that Adrian, in all his quietness, had ensured every digital asset, marketing license, and brand registration bore his name. Not to control her, but to protect her, he thought. But as he stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop, the spa's back-end dashboard opened, the logo glowing at the top corner, he realized it was time to reclaim what was his. And this time, he wouldn't ask. Do you know someone who's always giving, even when no one sees them? Share this story with them. Subscribe to HeartStories for more powerful, real-life inspired narratives that speak straight to the heart. 3 weeks passed before Adrian acted. It wasn't revenge that moved him. It was recognition of a truth he had been avoiding. He wasn't seen as a brother or a partner. He was a utility, a resource, the bottomless wallet. And he had spent years believing that generosity would buy him belonging. But belonging built on silence always asked for more. He began with the paperwork. He reopened the LLC filing originally created in his name years ago. When Maritza told him, "I just need you to help me start it, I'll do the rest." At the time, she had insisted on keeping the storefront small and the legal side simple, so Adrian did what he always did, he took care of it. Now he simply added 2 words after the brand name, founding branch. And then he opened another file for a second branch, same name, same branding, same concept, only this time, it would be in downtown El Paso, just a mile away from Maritza's location. He didn't announce anything. No family calls, no emails, just slow, precise execution. He found a space inside a recently renovated building known for its inclusive business community. He hired a local interior designer, someone LGBTQ+, who had been turned down by Maritza's spa once for not fitting the client image. Then he began reaching out to specialists, single mothers, older women re-entering the workforce, even an ex-convict esthetician who had rebuilt her life. He didn't ask about their past. He asked what they dreamed of now. The marketing campaign launched with a soft whisper, not a shout. The Instagram account, already verified from his marketing credentials, posted a teaser. The original returns, rooted in care, reimagined in truth. No face, no names, just the familiar logo that Maritza had assumed she owned, floating above a single caption coming home. When the billboard went up just 4 blocks from her location, Maritza noticed. At first, she thought it was a copycat. Then she saw the legal footnote. She called him furious, but he didn't pick up. She texted once, "Is this your idea of family?" He didn't reply, because for the first time in his life, Adrian had stopped paying with silence. The soft launch drew quiet curiosity. The full opening, however, drew a crowd. A local journalist wrote a short feature on the spa's inclusive hiring model and community-led pricing system. Adrian didn't give interviews, but his staff did, and they spoke with conviction. "We're not here to be glamorous," one of them said. "We're here to be real, to be safe, to be healing." When the article ran, Maritza filed an injunction. She claimed brand theft, public confusion, and moral injury. Her attorney sent over a cease and desist citing years of emotional investment. Adrian forwarded it to his legal team with a single line: "Respond with the trademark records and the signed agreements. Let the record speak." In court, the silence shifted. The judge read the documents, the original filings, the brand registrations, the bank transfers, the creative licenses. Adrian never once raised his voice. He didn't need to. The timeline told a story more honest than any family speech. Maritza's voice cracked during her testimony. She called him cruel, ungrateful, calculated. But when the judge looked up, she didn't ask about family. She asked, "Did you ever acknowledge him as a co-founder?" Maritza hesitated. "No, he was just helping." The courtroom was still. The ruling took 10 minutes. The trademark and branding belonged solely to Adrian. The new location was authorized to operate under the founding name. Maritza's use of it was not revoked, but from that moment on, it would include a required notation independent of founding branch. For the first time, the family name didn't carry weight. Only the truth did. Adrian walked out alone, no applause, no celebration. But as he stepped into the street, a former employee of Maritza's approached him, someone who had once quit without saying goodbye. She looked at him with soft eyes and said, "We always knew it wasn't her who built it. Thank you for finally saying it out loud." He nodded, not as a victor, but as someone who had finally chosen his own name over silence. Adrian didn't return to Los Angeles after the court ruling, not immediately. He rented a small apartment above the new spa, barely furnished, just a mattress on the floor and a second-hand coffee maker by the window. But it was enough. He spent his mornings downstairs, not in a suit behind a desk, but in jeans and rolled-up sleeves, wiping down counters, checking on supplies, and learning the quiet rhythm of the place he had built. He began hosting community hours every Saturday sessions, where locals could come in, talk, receive basic care, or simply rest. No appointments, no judgment. One afternoon, a teenage boy came in, eyes down, cheeks flushed. He had been bullied at school for wearing lip gloss. One of the staff, a trans esthetician named Raina, sat him down, offered him a warm towel, and asked what kind of self-care made him feel powerful. The boy whispered, "I don't know. I've never been allowed to think about that." Adrian watched from a distance. That moment, small as it seemed, became the soul of the spa. It wasn't about luxury. It was about reclamation for every person who had been told they didn't fit, didn't matter, didn't belong. Soon word spread, not just about the services, but the atmosphere. Teachers came after work to decompress. Elderly neighbors stopped in for hand massages. LGBTQ+ youth found a safe corner they never knew they needed. Adrian didn't advertise the spa as for the marginalized, but it was clear in every gesture. Here, everyone mattered, but for his family, the silence thickened. Maritza never spoke to him after court. The rest of the family split quietly. Some unfollowed him online. Others sent clipped messages asking if he would still be able to help out with bills now that he was running his own thing. Adrian didn't respond, not out of spite, but because the version of him they wanted no longer existed. The tipping point came during Thanksgiving. For the first time in 15 years, Adrian declined the invitation. Instead, he hosted a dinner at the spa for anyone who had nowhere else to go. The table was mismatched plates borrowed from neighbors, folding chairs from the back room, but it was full. There were drag performers and single parents, a delivery driver who had worked through dinner for the past decade, and a mother estranged from her daughter for being too supportive of her gay son. No speeches were made, no photos were posted, just quiet eating, shared laughter, and stories that didn't need editing. Adrian sat at the head of the table listening, and somewhere between the second round of mashed potatoes and a story about a rescued dog named Gloria, He realized this too was family. Not inherited, not assigned, but chosen. And in the quiet joy of that night, something in him settled. The urge to prove himself, to be seen, to earn love through sacrifice, it melted. He was no longer building to be accepted. He was building because it mattered. The following week, a small envelope arrived at the spa. No name, just his address in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet, a flyer for Maritza's spa, now rebranded under a new name. No logo, no mention of the dream, just a discount coupon. On the back in pen, "I hope you're proud. I'm starting over." Adrian read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it in a drawer beside the original trademark certificate. Not out of bitterness, but as proof that even endings can be soft. His staff asked him if he felt vindicated. He only smiled and said, "No, I feel clean." The calm didn't last. A few weeks after the quiet Thanksgiving, Adrian received a message from his father. It was brief. "Your uncle's birthday is this Saturday. We expect you there. Don't make a scene." There was no please, no question, just expectation, as if nothing had changed. Adrian stared at the screen. He hadn't spoken to his father in over a year since the last family dinner, where his relationship had been referred to as a lifestyle choice. He'd walked out that night, leaving behind a plate of untouched rice and beans and a room full of relatives who kept chewing like nothing had been said. Now they wanted him back, not to mend things, but to maintain appearances. Still, part of him wanted to go, maybe for his uncle, maybe to prove to himself, to them, that he could return without shrinking. He went. The party was held in a banquet hall with plastic chandeliers and mariachis playing by the door. As soon as Adrian walked in, conversations dipped. A few aunts smiled tightly, others avoided his eyes. His father approached with a stiff hug, then turned and whispered, "You didn't bring your friend, right?" Adrian simply replied, "His name is Noah. And no, he's working tonight." The conversation ended there. Dinner passed in fragments. People talked around him, not to him. When someone mentioned the spa, a cousin laughed and said, "So you finally got tired of being the family's investor, huh?" The table chuckled, except for his uncle, who cleared his throat and said nothing. Later, Adrian stepped out for air. The parking lot was quiet, the music muffled behind the glass. He stood under the sodium lights, breathing. That's when his mother approached. She didn't greet him, just stood next to him, arms crossed. "You embarrassed your sister," she said after a long pause. "You could have let her keep the name." Adrian turned slowly. It was never hers. She built it. "With my hands." She shook her head. "You always have to make it about you." That hit deeper than expected. "I gave everything," Adrian said, voice low. "Years of money, of work, of silence. I asked for nothing. Not even acknowledgement." His mother looked at him, finally meeting his eyes. "You gave because you were trying to earn something you didn't deserve. You think we turned our backs on you, but Adrian, you chose this life. You chose the sin." There it was, no metaphor, no avoidance, just the wound cut open. Adrian didn't answer right away. He looked up at the sky, blank black, cloudless, and then back at the woman who gave him life, but never allowed him to live it. "I didn't choose to love men," he said quietly, "but I choose not to hate myself for it. And I choose not to be punished for giving more than I ever received." She didn't reply. She didn't hug him, just turned and walked back inside, leaving him alone by the pavement. Adrian drove home that night without the radio on. In the silence, he realized something had shifted. Not broken, just shifted. He had spent years believing if he gave enough, worked enough, softened enough, they would meet him halfway. But they had drawn the line a long time ago. All that was left was for him to stop standing on their side of it. When he reached home, Noah was asleep on the couch, a half-read book on his chest. Adrian sat beside him, gently lifted the book and placed it on the table. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes, not in pain, not in anger, but in the deep, worn peace of a man who had finally stopped begging for love that had conditions. He whispered into the quiet as if to himself, "I wasn't made to be a wallet, or a scapegoat, or a secret. I was made for more." And in that moment, something heavy let go. Spring came early in El Paso. The wind softened. The windows of Adrian's spa stayed open longer, letting in sunlight that stretched across the polished floors and caught in the soft laughter of the people inside. The place no longer felt like a project. It felt lived in, rooted. Like it had finally put down its own spine. Adrian had stopped checking his family's social media. He no longer hovered over old texts or waited for apologies that were never going to come. Instead, he started mentoring a group of queer youth in the area, helping them build confidence resumes. Sometimes even just giving them a ride home when no one else would. On Sundays, he and Noah hosted quiet dinners for people who had lost their families in different ways, some to death, others to silence. At the end of each meal, they would light a candle and say a name of someone they chose to remember. One afternoon, Adrian received a letter in the mail, handwritten with no return address. It was from Maritza. She didn't beg, she didn't explain. It was only a few lines. I didn't know how much of myself I had built on what you gave. I'm trying to start again with what's mine this time. I hope you're well. Adrian folded the note. He didn't cry, but he held it for a long time. A few days later, he received a formal invitation. His cousin was getting married. The card was ornate, gold-trimmed, signed by every member of the family except him. At the bottom, a note read, "We hope you can attend and support the family." He placed the card next to Maritza's letter. One handwritten, one printed, one trying, one assuming. The difference was sharp. Adrian didn't go to the wedding. Instead, on that day, he stood behind the counter of his spa, helping a new hire, Jaden, a non-binary teen who had just aged out of the foster system, set up their first facial station. They were nervous. Adrian told them what no one had told him when he started. You don't have to prove you belong. You already do. The rest is just showing up. That evening, he hosted a panel at the community center about building safe queer spaces in small towns. The room was full. Activists, small business owners, teens with wide eyes and shaky hands holding notebooks. When it was his turn to speak, Adrian stood behind the podium and took a moment before saying anything. Then he began. I used to think being needed was the same as being loved. That giving money times silence meant I had a place. That if I was generous enough, I'd eventually be accepted, not as myself, but as useful. And then I learned something hard but true: when you give without boundaries, people don't see generosity. They see a well that doesn't run dry. They see a bottomless wallet. He looked up, but I ran dry. And in that emptiness, I found something better than their approval. I found myself. The room was quiet, not in discomfort, but in recognition, like something unspoken had finally been named. After the panel, a young woman approached him tearful. I've been helping my family pay rent for years, she whispered. They still won't call me their daughter, just their roommate. Adrian gently touched her shoulder. You're not alone, he said, and you're not crazy for wanting more. That night at home, Adrian and Noah sat by the window legs, touching under the small table. They talked about their dreams, not just for themselves, but for the kind of world they wanted to leave behind. A world where no one had to choose between being themselves and being accepted. Adrian still kept Maritza's letter. He didn't frame it, he didn't reread it often, but it stayed like a stone in the pocket, not a weight, just a reminder that some ties unravel, others reshape, and some are better left as soft goodbyes. He hadn't spoken to his parents again. He didn't know if he ever would, but that no longer felt like a tragedy, because somewhere between being erased and reclaiming his voice, Adrian had written his own name, not just on the spa's glass window, but into the lives he touched, the community he built, and the love he finally allowed himself to keep. And that name could never be taken back. Have you ever given too much just to be seen? What did it take for you to say enough? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HeartStories for more true-to-life narratives about identity, family, and the quiet strength of becoming your whole self.